Hey, we're the Diva Docs, and we have Dr. Joy,
Dr. Joy,
Dr. Uzma,
Dr. Uzma,
and me, Elisa O'Keefe Smith, and I'm an almost doc, doctoral candidate and future doc, and we have with us, we are honoured today to have the amazing, the infamous Jerry Heller. Jerry, how are you?
I'm doing really good, thank you. I feel underqualified to be here with all of you educated ladies.
Well, you know, I it would be remiss of me to go anywhere with this interview without giving credit to my wonderful friend and your wonderful friend, Doug Young. Doug Young introduced me to you back in April when he threw a party for me, and I just have to say a big shout out to Doug. Love him. What do you have to say?
Well, I met Doug in 1987 at
Wow.
Mikola, and he's probably the greatest promotion man ever in the history of our business, and we've remained very dear friends over the years.
Exactly. I do have to say, Jerry, that just hearing Doug talk about you, his reverence and his love for you, it's beyond compare. He absolutely loves you. I can say that without a doubt because I hear it whenever he speaks about you. And, you know, that's such a wonderful thing to have in a friend, someone who loves you.
We have a good relationship.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And, you know, as I said, I love Doug myself. We've been friends for a couple of years now, and he makes me laugh. So he makes me laugh. And Doug, hey, we want to give you a shout out. First one off the bat. So with regards to your whole history, I want to let the audience know who you are. With regards to your whole history, how did you get into the music industry? And everyone knows you for N.W.A. and Eazy-E, of course, but how did you get into the industry? And do you want to tell us a bit more about all the other acts you had before N.W.A. and Eazy-E?
Well, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to a small school in southern Ohio, and then I came out here in 1960 and had stopped in Las Vegas on the way because where I'm from, all the hotels in Vegas were owned by mobsters from Cleveland.
Yes.
So I lived at the Desert Inn. And I went to the University of Southern California, which was the only school in California which accepted all of my credits.
Wow.
Everyone.
There you go.
So, and not only that, it was $8 a unit.
Oh,
Wow.
And then when I went to graduate school at USC of Business, it was $12 a unit.
Wow.
So I got out of school, I went in the Army, and when I got out of the Army, I got a job at a bank for $425 a month. I said, you know, this isn't what I want to do. So my cousin, who was an entertainer, who had worked at the Frontier for 30 years, said to me, listen, I'll get you a job with my agent. So I got a job with his agent for $125 a week, which was $99.75. I mean, $125 a week, but netted $99.75 a week. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I always tell my students that sooner or later you'll find something that you want to do.
Definitely.
And from the day that I started in the music business, there was no question in my mind why guys like Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan always had smiles on their faces. They did what they loved to do.
Exactly.
I was in the music business. I had no musical ability and knew nothing really about music. But as I've said many times, sometimes it's more important to be in the right place at the right time than it is anything else.
Yes.
Right.
So I was in rock and roll at the beginning of rock and roll. And remember now there's two parts to the word show business.
Definitely.
There's the show part and there's the business part.
Yeah.
And they're equally as important because you must develop your business relationships
Definitely.
the same as you develop your music relationships.
Exactly.
So in any service business, all you have is your time. So if you waste your time, being involved with people that aren't going to move along the same as you are, or at the same rate that you are, pretty soon
Definitely.
you've run out of upward mobility.
Exactly.
And in show business, there's no staying the same. Either you move ahead or you drop behind. Now remember the people that I started off with were David Geffen and
Wow.
Bill Graham and Barry Gordy. And
Wow.
I started off with guys that wound up being the most important guys
Yes.
In the industry.
in show business.
Definitely.
And just to tell you a story, in 1970, after I had brought Elton John to America and Pink Floyd,
Wow.
and I was representing Journey and Styx, and REO Speedwagon, and Joan Armatrading and Marvin Gaye and
Wow.
the Four Tops, I got a letter from a freshman at the University of Illinois who said he wanted to be in the music business.
Ha!
So I liked his letter, and I said, well, if you can fly out here, I said, I'll meet with you. So he flew out. I remember the first time I met him, he was a little guy, and I really liked him, so I hired him. And his name was Irving Azoff.
Wow.
Wow.
Just one of the biggest.
He is the most important man
It's amazing.
in the history of
Definitely.
music. And he's another guy that knows nothing about music.
There you go. There you go. That's awesome. That is.
He never lets any personal feelings interfere with his business decisions. So every decision he makes is based on the merits of the deal,
Right.
and he's never wrong. He's never wrong. And look, he's managed the Eagles since 1973.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
In our business, in show business years, let's see, 73.
73. That's
40
40
years.
years.
Wow.
Yeah, that's 280 years in show business.
Wow.
So he's a special guy, and
Wow.
we're very, very close friends. But once again, I was in San Francisco with Bill Graham, who I think is certainly one of the most important guys. In fact, if you got nothing to do while you're in town, there's a big Bill Graham exposition at the Skirball Center
Okay.
Nice.
right now, and it's very, very well done.
Wow.
But I said to him, I said, listen, Bill, and we had a love-hate relationship. Well, he understood where he was coming from. I understood my position. I represented the little guy. He was on the other side of the table. But that didn't matter, didn't mean that we couldn't respect each other.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I said, Bill, where can I go to get laid? So he said, there's a great bar around the corner where nurses hang out.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
So
You got ducks here.
So I said, okay. So I go over there, and there's a band there playing called the Gollywogs.
Wow.
And I said, wow, they're really good. So I stayed after the show, and I said to the band, I said, first of all, you should be the lead singer, not you. And you got to change the name. That name is just
The Gollywogs.
stupid. So they said, yeah, okay. What do you think of the name Creedence Clearwater Revival?
Oh, wow. No. Wow.
So like
That
I
was
say,
awesome.
sometimes it's more important to be in the right place
Exactly.
at the right time
Exactly.
than it is. So, I've always thought that an album that I thought was probably the second most important album of the 20th century, Sgt. Pepper,
Yes, Beatles. Yeah.
ruined the music business. It set the bar so impossibly high
Yeah, I love the Beatles.
for everybody else that it changed the focus of the music business
Wow.
from the music to getting records played.
Right.
So
Right.
now you got all these mob guys that could get records played,
Mm-hmm.
and they became the important guys
Wow.
in our business.
Mm.
So I was going through my first divorce at the time, and I went back home to live with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and I heard about from a guy named Maury Alexander who represented a lot of old blues guys in Chicago like Charlie Musselwhite
Right.
and,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and Jimmy Witherspoon and Siegel Schwall Blues Band.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you got to get over to this little place in Hollywood called Mikola Records.
Right. Yes.
And I said, why? And the music business is really the only win-win business that I've ever seen. The more the artist makes, the more everybody makes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In any other business, whether it's real estate or whatever, the more the artist makes, the less everyone else makes.
That's true.
In real estate, the more one person makes,
Exactly.
the less
Uh-huh.
somebody else makes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not true in the music business.
Mm-hmm.
Music business has true economic integrity.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
I went over to, after about 3 months, I was hanging out a little bit
Mm-hmm.
at a place called Eve After Dark, which was owned by a
Okay.
guy named Alonzo Williams.
Okay. He was he was at the club that night in April.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alonzo, to me, is one of the most important guys
Wow.
in the early
Mhm.
days of hip-hop. So, and, I didn't like East Coast hip-hop at all. Because, well, first of all, it has no melody.
Right.
I
Uh-huh.
like melody, and it has no sense of humor.
Right.
So, Alonzo kept telling me, and Maury kept saying, you got to go over here, you got to go to this place, Mikola, where for $1,000, you got 500 records and the artwork.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this guy, McMillan, would send the records to guys that did. There were 4 or 5
Right.
other guys. There was Big Tree and
Mm-hmm.
in Texas. There was a guy in Atlanta. There was 4 or 5 guys
Right.
that did what he did that were owned pressing plants.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over there, and they took me to this little office, and I met this guy named Doug Young.
Doug Young, Doug, my buddy.
And he shared an office with a guy from Cleveland named Rufus Parrison,
Wow.
who called himself Rudy Pardee.
Mhm.
Yes.
And he had
You
a
like
group
him?
called he had a group called the LA Dream Team.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And he also had a group called JJ Fed.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
So I sort of liked what was happening there because for $200,
Mm-hmm.
guys were cutting records in their mother's garages
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
with machines that they bought at Toys R Us.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. That's
So in the old days, it cost $200 for tape.
wow.
And if these guys didn't like what they were cutting, they taped over it. So I said, okay, I like what's happening here. Okay, so I made a deal with Rudy Pardee. I was going to represent the Dream Team and JJ Fed, and I made a deal with Alonzo to represent the World Class Wrecking Crew.
Mm.
And I used to go down to Eve After Dark, and I got to tell you,
Hmm.
obviously, there weren't a whole lot of white people hanging out
Uh-huh.
at Eve After Dark.
Right.
There was one, me.
There you go. There you go.
And everybody treated me with respect, parked my car right in front. Nobody ever messed with me, but Alonzo
Right.
kept telling me about a guy that I should meet named Eric Wright. And I said, what's he doing? He said, well, he's a drug dealer, but he has a lot of money. And I said,
There you go.
it's not what I do, man. I'm not into that kind of thing, RICO statutes, and,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not into that. So, I want to keep it legal. Whatever I do,
Right.
I keep legal. So he kept bugging me, and finally, after about 3 months, he said to me, "Listen, Sky Arkwright offered me $750 to meet you."
How can you resist?
He says, "I need the money." He says, "Would you agree to meet with her?"
Oh, damn.
And I said,
Woo!
"Okay." I said, February 3rd of 1987.
Wow.
I'll be at Mikola. It was a Tuesday. Tell him to meet me out front. So I'm waiting out front. It's about 2:30, and this tricked out Suzuki Samurai pulls up, you know. And
There you go.
And he gets out, man. And this little tiny guy, man, like 5 feet tall,
Wow.
and reaches in his sock and pulls out a roll of money and pays Alonzo the $750.
Yeah, and that's
So-
for you.
Well, I thought that was cool, you know.
Yeah.
Before he said anything, so I said to him, "Okay, what is it that you want, man?" So he said, "Nothing." He didn't say one word.
Oh my.
And in show business, it's all about talking, man. There's no not talking. I got this group, and I got this guy, and I got these girls, and this is my group, and they're going to be the biggest in the world. He said nothing. Not a word.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
my goodness.
Oh, wow.
He hands me a cassette, man. And I play it, and it's Boyz-n-the-Hood. And I said, wow.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is a combination. Now remember, I'm 45 then.
Wow.
He's 19 or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I grew up with the Rolling Stones.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up with Gil Scott-Heron.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I grew up and represented the Panthers.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I understood
Mm-hmm.
the rebellion of the Stones,
Mm-hmm.
the anger of the Panthers,
Wow.
the poetry
Mhm.
of Gil Scott-Heron,
Wow.
and I didn't say anything.
Mhm.
And I said, "What do you call this group?" And he said, "N.W.A."
Wow.
And I said, "What's that stand for?" No whites allowed. So he started laughing, and he said, "Not really." Then he played me Straight Outta Compton.
There you go.
Straight Outta Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube in a band called Niggers with Attitudes. And I said, "You know something, man? This is the heaviest music that I've ever heard. And if me, a middle-class white Jewish guy from Shaker Heights, Ohio,
Yes, shaker.
can relate to this, the rest of white middle-class America, for the first time, are going to understand the problems of our inner cities."
Mm.
So, my problem, you know, you have different problems in the music business. First of all, the first problem is the music.
Yeah.
You got to find people with music.
Definitely.
And then normally,
Mhm.
you got to pay to record it.
Right.
Here's the guy that has the music.
There you go.
He's taken the single most important element
Mm-hmm.
out of the equation for me.
Right. Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He's made my life easier.
There you go.
So I said, okay, my problem now becomes a marketing issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what am I going to do? So I go to what I felt was the cutting edge of our society,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the surfers and skateboarders in Huntington Beach.
Yes.
So I go down there and spend a couple months down there. And you know what they're listening to? They're listening to Suicidal Tendencies. They're listening to Metallica.
Yes.
They're listening to a little record that sold 30 million copies called Appetite for Destruction.
Ha.
And I said, wait a second, man.
That's right.
Anybody that buys Appetite for Destruction buys Straight Outta Compton.
Right. Definitely.
I said, that's my audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I got to be friends with them. And if you look at any interview that any of those groups did between 87 and 91, they're wearing Eazy-E hats and Straight Outta Compton t-shirts.
Yeah.
And their videos,
There you go.
they became the idols of all those groups. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really how we got
Right.
started.
Wow.
Right.
And there are a lot of things that happened in between. I went to see Joe Smith, who was a friend of mine. He was the chairman of the board of Capitol, and he had owned Warner Reprise with Mo Austin and Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
And I said, Joe, you got to listen to this music. And, I played him a song, What the Fuck Is Up, Who the Fuck Is He?
I love saying fuck on camera, by the way.
Coming on the mic is Easy motherfucking E. And he said to me, are you crazy? He said, Jerry, you got to quit getting high. He said, no one will ever listen to this. No one certainly will buy it. And nobody will play it.
Right.
And I said, Joe, I remember when radio stations wouldn't play Let's Spend the Night Together by the Rolling Stones. Now Mick Jagger's Frank Sinatra.
Yes.
I said, times change, man. This is the music of the future.
Definitely.
And he turned it down. And the only guy that I could get to distribute it was a guy named Brian Turner. Now, I had known Brian Turner from KTEL. And because I had put out some records called Hooked on Classics with Lewis Clark from ELO, who were clients of mine. And they did classical music set to rock and roll.
Right, wow.
So I got him to come to see. We went to a skating ring where there was a shooting that night, and he's laying on the floor. And he said, I don't know, I don't understand any of this. But if you say it's good, he says, I believe in you.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
So we made a deal, and that really was how Ruthless started.